Good evening and welcome to Upstairs at the Fat Board. I'm delighted to welcome all the candidates for residency to be here. We'll dive straight in, so if we can go essentially round the panel and introduce who you are and what party you're standing for. We'll start with Carol.
Good evening everyone, my name is Carol O'Toole and I am the Welsh Liberal Democrat candidate for the constituency of Wrexham.
Hello everybody, my name is Carrie Harper and I'm Plaid Cymru's candidate for Wrexham for the general election.
Good evening everybody, my name's Andrew Atkinson and I'm the Welsh Conservative Party candidate for Wrexham.
Hello there, I'm Ian Lucas, the Labour Parliamentary candidate for Wrexham.
We'll dive straight in. Obviously we've got limited time here, so we'll kick straight through. The first question I was going to say is a general question to everybody, is that the election itself was effectively triggered by the referendum itself. Are you able to tell us if you changed your mind how you voted personally in that referendum, and what policy your party has that will mitigate any impact or perhaps even bring maximum benefit to Wrexham? We'll start off with yourself.
The position is that we are leaving the European Union and Brexit is happening. What's important now is that we have the right Brexit for Wrexham. We have a lot of exporting and manufacturing jobs. Wrexham, and we need to negotiate a deal for Wrexham that's going to be in the best interests of all those Airbus workers, those Magellan workers who are exporting goods to not only the European Union but of course the world beyond. So we need the best deal, and that's what I would fight for as the MP for Wrexham.
Thank you very much.
I want to fight for the best deal for Wrexham, the best deal for the United Kingdom. That's why I'm very, very happy with the decision that I made in voting to leave. I fully support Theresa May as the person that I want to see sat there in that negotiating table, getting the best deal for the United Kingdom, getting the best deal for Wrexham. There's a lot, as Ian has said, about the businesses that we've got around here that we need to, look after their interests and make sure that we also seize the opportunities that global trade brings as well. And I'm actually quite excited about that. So I think it's not just about sort of protecting what we've got, it's about going out there into the world, into this brave new world, and actually getting quite excited about these new opportunities that we've got as well.
Carrie?
Well, we accept the results. We did campaign to remain within the European Union. We accept the fact that we are leaving, and I think the debate has to move on now to look at how we get the best Brexit deal for Wales, and that's about making sure that we're not a penny worse off. There are key priorities that we need to think about in terms of the Welsh economy, so we need to make sure that we secure funding for agriculture, that we secure funding for our structural funds, which went to our most deprived communities, and to make sure that we secure tariff-free access to the single market as well, because 200,000 jobs in Wales are dependent on the single market, 6,000 of those just down the road in Airbus, so that's absolutely crucial. We're determined as well that we're going to hold the Tories' feet to the fire in terms of the pledges that they made during the referendum campaign. We had senior Tories like Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, standing in front of that bus promising 350 million a week for the NHS. Well, our share of that, Wales' share of that, is 17.5 million every week. Add together the pledges for agriculture and our structural funds, that's £30 million a week that should be on the way to Wales if the Tories are going to come good on their promises.
Voted to remain. I'm a very committed Remainer, I'm a firm Remainer, and I haven't changed my mind. And I am a member of the party, of all the parties, that's the most pro-European. And interestingly, we're all talking about the nature of the deal now and protecting our rights, protecting what we have. But it's my party that's giving the general public, the voter, the opportunity to have a say in that deal. And it's my party that's saying, the Liberal Democrat Party, that's saying we want to give the public a chance to vote on that deal. I think that people are talking about protecting what we have. At the moment, we have no guarantee whatsoever of what we're going to be able to protect and what we're not going to be able to protect. And already we've heard a lot of facts and figures about the fact that a lot of aspects of the Welsh economy are reliant on European funding, our jobs, our exports, especially our lamb exports. So much of the life of our rural communities depends on European funding, cap policies, and at the moment as we speak we don't really know what's going to happen to any of that. The future is very uncertain. The knock-on effect on the Welsh economy, the economy of this town, the economy of Britain, we don't know. And so people are saying we can protect what we have already. We don't actually know that. So that I'm proud to belong to the party that's saying let's give the voter an opportunity to speak on the deal.
Of course, we could have had this general election after the deal was concluded. This is an unnecessary general election because the Prime Minister had an overwhelming majority to trigger Article 50 and go forward, negotiate the deal that Carol's been talking about, and then have a general election at the end of that deal. She chose not to for party political advantage because she thought that it was in her personal advantage to go forward and have a general election now, something that she said she wasn't going to do in the national interest. So I think that people have rumbled that. When I talk to people on the doorstep, they know that this is an unnecessary general election at this stage. The negotiations could have taken place now, and then we could have seen what the deal was that Carol's been discussing at the end of the process and had a general election. But the Conservatives, for their own party political advantage, have called the election. I think they're going to get a shot.
Is that a fair comment?
I don't think so, no. I think what's right about this is that this takes us past this new Parliament, this new government would take us past the point of these negotiations. I think that's really important. It does give stability. A majority around, for Theresa May there does give even more stability. And a second referendum, or what Ian's talking about, going to the country with the terms of that deal, I don't think gives any incentive for the European Union to actually give us a good deal. Because if we're going to say, right, we're going to have a second referendum, or we're going to go to the country with the terms of this deal, the European Union will probably give us an appalling deal, because we're a net contributor, we pay in more than we get out, would give us a bad deal, so that when we go to the country, if it was a straightforward binary choice of, this is the deal that you've got, or do you want to stay in the European Union, it would then force people to stay in the European Union because they would have given us a bad deal. I don't think that's in the interest of the British people, so I obviously disagree, but I think Theresa May has acted quite responsibly there.
You're laughing at that, Carrie. What's your opinion
I'm
on that?
laughing because we heard from Theresa May repeatedly there's not going to be a snap general election over and over again. She's U-turned on that. She's U-turned on policies in her manifesto after 4 days of publishing it. So I don't see how we can really take the Tories seriously on anything to do with this. But my main concern is making sure that we get the funding that we were promised by those senior spokespeople for Wales, funding that's key to our agriculture sector, structural funds, key to funding our NHS. There's a lot of doctors and nurses could be funded at 17.5 million a week, Andrew. Are you going to go and campaign for that money for Wales if you're elected as Wrexham MP? Because I know I will.
Well, I didn't campaign with Vote Leave with that number on the side of the bus.
So it's nothing to do with you, no?
No, it isn't. You made that point before that this was Tories who went out there. There was Labour, very small, admittedly, number of Labour people.
Theresa May still
Hang on, if I could just finish, please.
It's the same bus, Andrew.
If I could just finish, please. £350 million a day, that was put out there, that was out by Vote Leave. I've never gone out there pushing those figures. What I did during the referendum was actually do as much as I could to give people as much impartial information as they wanted, which is why I set up debates and everything else in Wrexham. I wasn't out there, as you know, pushing those figures myself, and as I've said, there were Labour people involved in that as well, admittedly a much smaller number.
So you're not going to go and fight for proper funding for Wales?
I've never said that, of course I will.
Could I bring in another issue which I think is quite moot in all this and which picks up on some of Ian's points, which is that we've had so many elections of late that I firmly believe when talking to people that people are election weary, and I think that impacts on the working of democracy, and that's another big concern that I have. I think that despite the best efforts of the party to bring the issues to the electorate, there is considerable confusion out there. And I think this is another reason why to have had another election, a general election so quickly, is not working in favour of the democratic process.
Can I just say that I actually disagree with that? We have had the election called. What I'm hearing from the people of Wrexham is that they want to talk about policing, they want to talk about pensions, they want to talk about their income and the economy, they want to talk about a whole wide range of issues. They don't just want to talk about Brexit, and they are engaging very strongly in this because there's a lot of issues which I've been focusing on, which people are very unhappy about within Wrexham, and which they want to discuss, and they want to hold this Tory government to account on.
for example, the reductions in policing, which is a major issue within Wrexham town.
Yes, I think
I
that
was just saying
people
that,
are...
what we'll do, we'll kick on to the individual questions now, because that seems a pretty apt point to kind of leave Brexit perhaps behind, even though it's a big future. The seating positions have been randomly selected by various people on Twitter, which is wonderful, and likewise the questions. We'll kick off with an individual question one by one, and then we'll have a chance to respond and perhaps give a verdict on the answer as well. I'll say Mr. Atkinson's going to be up first, or the Brody Waterford.
Go on, fire away.
Focusing on cuts to ESA, the Employment Support Allowance, which has been about £30, that's been framed by some Conservatives to give disabled people who receive them an incentive to get a job. Do you and your party colleagues really think that some people with disabilities are not working because they get so much money from the state? And if not, are you able to give the context from the Conservative point of view on that cut?
No, I don't agree with that. I think that's an entirely fair. I think there's a lot that needs looking at across disability benefits, an awful lot. I think there are a lot more people in work now, a lot more disabled people in work, and I think we've got a long way to go on that as a government. There's a lot that I would want to do as the MP for Wrexham, working with various employers and Remploy and all kinds of different people to help disabled people get into work. But I don't think it's as crude a point as we need to just sort of cut a benefit to sort of push them into work. But I think we do need to help people into work and actually recognise the opportunities that are out there for people with disabilities, but also look at what people with disabilities can bring to local employers as well, who have a lot of strengths and a lot of talent and a lot of skills to offer. So that's the sort of thing that I will be fighting for local people as the MP, and doing everything that I can to actually make sure that if anyone is affected by anything like that, that I can stand up and be a strong voice for them.
You're saying this to be looked at. Are there any specifics of the existing policy that concern you on a personal level?
Yeah, I've just said that. I said I don't take the view that actually sort of just cutting somebody's money is the way to say, right, you know, that will help them into work. I think when it comes to cuts or anything else, we have to look at everything responsibly in terms of balancing the deficit and balancing the budget, making sure that we actually act responsibly with the finite resources that we have. But for me, it's not an issue and never has been of helping disabled people or anyone else into work. I want to see more people in work. I want to see, you know, people actually getting jobs and actually getting the job satisfaction that comes with that. But actually, you know, to me, that's not a financial thing. It's actually about helping people get, you know, a good job and the satisfaction that comes with it, and everything else. That's where I'm coming from, not about the finances.
Also, got three people shaking heads. So,
I'm sure. Yeah.
One of the problems with what Andrew says is that he is the Conservative candidate. The Conservative government has introduced a policy, for example, on PIP, where motability cars are being withdrawn from disabled people in work, preventing them from going to work because of government policy. And those are being withdrawn immediately pending appeals, and as a result individuals who are disabled are really suffering. And it's all very well Andrew saying, oh, that needs to be changed. The reality is he is standing for the party that has implemented this policy, and there are no proposals whatever in the Conservative manifesto to change that. The only way to change that is to stop the Conservatives governing, because we know that the Conservative Party will hit people with disabilities. My constituency surgeries have been full of people affected by this cruel policy.
If I can on that, that's the cruel policy that the Labour government signed the contract with Atos. They kicked all of it off.
That's not true. That's untrue.
I think you'll find that it is.
That's untrue.
They
you should
signed
withdraw
the contract.
that immediately.
Well, we'll
the mobility issue is not
I've just said
one that was
sign the
introduced.
contract. Sign the contract.
Please
with
don't
Atos.
misrepresent the Labour Party position.
I'm not misrepresenting the Labour Party
You
position.
are entirely.
I didn't even mention disability cars there. Mobility cars. I said sign the contract with Atos, which you did for helping disabled people into work and for work capability assessments. Work capability assessments was introduced by the Labour Party. You signed the contract with Atos, and we had to scrap that contract, look at another contract, and even that contract has a lot of problems, which as the MP I would be looking into. That is true.
The Tories were withdrawing mobility cars. That was nothing to do with Labour.
I can't say it was.
To answer the question specifically, research shows that cutting people's benefits does not help them find work. So I think that, you know, that's quite clear for a start. And then you've got to think about why these benefits are being cut in the first place. And the reason that we're seeing austerity, massive cuts to welfare, cuts to the public sector, is because of the Tory policy to eliminate the deficit. Now, we heard from the Tories in 2010 they were going to eliminate the deficit within 5 years. Now we're hearing it's going to take another decade or possibly two. The UK debt currently stands at an extra 555 billion under the Tories, so that's why you won't hear them talking anymore about the long-term economic plan, by the way, because it's looking more and more like a back of a fag packet job. But you know, the serious side of this is what austerity cuts have meant. They've meant savage cuts to welfare, they've meant cuts to the public sector, to in-work and out-of-work benefits, to disabled people, to sick people. Ian mentioned there's 900 mobility cars a week now being taken off disabled people, housing benefit withdrawn for 18 to 21 year olds, the bedroom tax, support withdrawn for people who are going through bereavement, and on top of all that we have lost 62,000 jobs in the public sector in Wales. That's policemen, firemen, that's 700 jobs at Wrexham Council, that's 400 jobs at our tax office. And those are the things that are impacting on our communities in Wrexham. At the same time, your party is giving tax breaks to the rich, lowering capital gains tax, lowering top rates of tax. You know, it's absolutely immoral. And the Labour Party are not whiter than white on this issue either. In January 2015, Ian, your party voted with the Tories for George Osborne's Charter of Budget Responsibility for £30 billion worth of public sector cuts. And also, a few months later in July 2015, your party abstained on the welfare reform bill. Now, those cuts are impacting on our community, so how can any of us in Wrexham expect either of your parties to defend our interests looking at your record?
We have not got a conservative economic policy. We oppose austerity, and the failed. We do oppose austerity. We oppose austerity again and again. Because you select one vote which is not representative of the Labour Party position. I could quote hundreds of votes where we have voted against the Conservative position. The Conservative austerity policy has failed. As Carrie says, the deficit was meant to be eliminated by 2015. It's failed. They're talking about 2022 now, maybe 2025. The failure of their economic policy is evident, but it's being pursued on the backs of disabled people, on the backs of poor people, whilst inheritance tax, capital gains tax are being cut. That's the Tory party for you.
And you've helped them
Carol,
do it.
can we go back to the question on that one?
Yes. Could I perhaps take the debate in a quite different direction in terms of trying to bring us back to the question and ask what type of a society do we want to live in, and to what extent do we want to protect the most vulnerable, but also enable them to access job opportunities if they're in a position to be able to work, so that we are all in a more equal society that cares and provides a safety net for those people who, for whatever reason, and it may be a long-term predicament or it may be a temporary predicament, aren't able in this instance to maybe work. How do we protect them? How do we encourage them to find work? And I think we have to concede, or I believe, that the introduction of PIPs just hasn't worked. We see very frequently on our television, and also, as Ian has said in his surgery, the devastating effect the changes in the benefit system have had on people, and particularly people with disability. So I think that the whole scheme needs to be revisited, and we have to introduce new criteria which both ensures that people who, for whatever reason, and in this case we're talking mainly about disability, are perhaps not able to access jobs, still have a decent standard of living and are encouraged to look for work if that's possible. And of course the other side of this is creating an environment with employers which encourages them to give opportunities to disabled people. And there's a whole tranche of legislation that could possibly, or encouragement that could be looked at there to try and solve the problems. But I think the way some of the debate has gone so far, and I understand the reason why it's gone that way, is because so much of this has been a reaction to welfare cuts and to the way
I'll say welfare cuts will be a common theme.
Yes.
potentially, so
Yeah.
come back to-
So
very quickly, because we are at halfway point already.
I think we need, with some of these issues, to go back to what sort of a society do we want to live in, what protection and care and safety net do we want to offer people who are vulnerable for whatever reason, and almost start again to protect people.
We'll crack on. Sorry about that. We'll crack on.
If I would like to come back to the point.
We're going to have to move on. We're literally halfway point. The next question up is to Mr. Lucas. You wrote to your party leader Corbyn less than a year ago, saying that his approach to the referendum results comes to you personally, so he has no understanding of the issues we face and can never present a credible Labour response, and you have no confidence in his leadership. In the system we're in at the moment, a vote for you, essentially putting in as Prime Minister.
A vote for me is a vote for me as the Member of Parliament for Wrexham. There's been 5 Labour leaders in the time that I've been in Parliament and 5 Conservative leaders. Andrew Atkinson here was telling us 2 years ago that David Cameron was the answer to the country's problems, and David Cameron was campaigning to remain in the European Union. So leaders change. This is a vote for the Member of Parliament for Wrexham, the best person to stand up for Wrexham in the context of the next 5 years. And that's why I'm putting myself forward. I've had disagreements with Jeremy Corbyn. I've made no secret of that. I had disagreements with Tony Blair. I voted against the Labour whip when Tony Blair was the leader, because I vote with my conscience and in the best, what I believe is the best interest of Wrexham. I will continue to do that, and I will continue to argue the case for what I believe in on behalf of the people of Wrexham.
In terms of that, are you able to say that you'll be fully behind, come the morning of June the 9th, Chancellor Exchequer John McDonnell, Emily Thornberry, Foreign Secretary, Diane Abbott's Home Secretary, for example, would you be behind that team?
A Labour government is better than a Conservative government. I deal with this Conservative government and its impact on the people of Wrexham every day. I know right to my heart that a Labour government is what we need to stop this from happening to the people of Wrexham.
I remember in debates back in the 2015 general election when I would tell people, yeah, there are aspects of my party policy that I disagree with, and I'm very independently minded, and I will stick my neck out and vote a different way if I have to in the interest of the people that I represent. Ian tore me to shreds on that and said that I'm standing on a Labour Party manifesto and I fully back my leader. And that's funny how that has changed. The point that I'd like to make is that you are going door to door, and when anyone says I cannot vote for Jeremy Corbyn, you are telling people, please think about the amount of video cameras that people have on their doors before you answer this. You are telling people a vote for me is a vote to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. How do you answer that?
I don't do that. I say to people that you are voting for Ian Lucas, the Labour candidate for Wrexham.
That isn't true. A vote for me is a vote to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. Is what you are saying during this campaign time and time again.
Andrew talks about me all the time. Seems to know my inner thinking. I'm talking to people, and the people of Wrexham know me. I've been the MP for 16 years. They know I'm sincere, I'm straightforward, I don't abuse and exploit people. I don't abuse and exploit people. They will judge me, and I'll be confident they will judge me correctly. So please, don't say things that aren't true.
That's very, very true.
2 points I'd make. I mean, firstly, we all stand on the policy platform set out by our parties, Andrew included, whether you like it or not. Now, I can understand people disagreeing with a party on 1 or 2 policies, but I think the extent that it's gone to with Andrew now, he really needs to think about the party that he's standing on.
You said this last time, and it's still not
and I think
true.
it's a valid point. You need to be honest with people about the policy platform you're standing on. The second point, in terms of Ian asking for Jeremy Corbyn to step down, that is absolutely systematic of the splits and the infighting within the Labour Party at the moment. There's going to be more of that to come, and that is why the Labour Party is well, what about Plaid Cymru? We fully support our leader. You asked me to stand down.
I think you should speak to some of your colleagues.
I think she supports
I think you're making things up on the hoof, to be perfectly honest. At the end of the day, how are you going to defend our communities in Wrexham, in Wales, when you're too busy pulling each other to pieces within the Labour Party? You cannot defend our communities from the Tories. You cannot make sure we get the best economic settlement post-Brexit because you're too busy fighting amongst yourselves.
I stand up for Wrexham. I'm the one who's fighting a campaign to keep the Wrexham tax office open. I'm the one who's fighting a campaign to prevent Reading from being closed. Silence from the Conservative
not been
on my
silent, as
right.
you well know.
Silence from the Conservative on my right. Silence when in Hindlas Street the post office was closed by the government, and silence because this man will never stand up for Wrexham. He's much too interested in
see
his
if Liberal
career.
Democrats
But I do want to come
Wrexham.
back on that because we know that's not true.
Yes, the Liberal Democrats will most certainly stand up for Wrexham, and it's one of the reasons why I've put myself forward, because I would love to be the next MP for Wrexham, and I will be a very strong and committed voice advocating for Wrexham. But to pick up on some of the points that have been made in this part of the debate, I think that one of the aspects of this election is very interesting and perhaps to some extent marks it out from some of our previous general elections is the juxtaposition between the presidential style that's maybe being promoted by the leaders versus the local candidates. And I think in the past, in some constituencies, if a local candidate has had a good, strong local record of advocating strongly for that particular constituency, that has maybe predominated in the voter's mind when they've gone to the polling station. This election is different, I think, and possibly more interesting because of that difference, because we've got the big issues of Corbyn and Theresa May and the extent to which their prospective MPs do or don't agree with some of their major policies. And it is a very difficult dilemma for individual MPs when, whether they admit to it or not, they must fundamentally disagree with some of the policies that they're being asked to support. But fortunately for me, I'm not in that position.
In terms of that, we'll press on due to
No, I
time.
really do need to come on back, please, because
No,
this,
we're gonna
this
take
is going
on-
to be
take on
not
time.
debate, and I've answered what Ian has said.
We'll pick on the time. Carrie, your party leader said that we would not need troops if there were enough police officers on the streets in response to Manchester attacks. Do you agree with that view? And do you think that the Manchester attack should be politicised?
I think you've got to seriously look at policing after the horrific attack in Manchester. The Tories have cut 20,000 police across the UK since 2010. 1,000 of those were specialist firearms officers. So clearly you have to look at whether the police are properly resourced if the government have had to bring the army in to patrol the streets. So I think that is a relevant question. It's one that we need to look at. We need to make sure that our police force is properly resourced. We're of course calling for policing to be devolved to Wales. We have the ridiculous situation at the moment where Wales is the only country where policing isn't devolved. We've even seen policing devolved to English regions such as Manchester. And actually, because of the way the Barnett formula works, if policing were devolved to Wales, we would see an extra £25 million every year for our police force. So we're quite clear that what we would like to see is policing devolved, where we can shield our police force from Tory cuts. I'm even more confused, to be honest, about where Labour stand on this, because they have voted against devolving policing to Wales. We've had the chairman of their general election campaign, Wayne David, say just last week that Labour were fully committed to devolving police for Wales, and then we've had Diane Abbott say now is not the time to devolve police for Wales. So I don't know whether they're putting forward the policy in their English manifesto, their Welsh manifesto, or whether they even know what their policy is on this. Maybe Ian can expand.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Our policy is to have 853 more police officers in Wales. The Welsh Government supports policing by increasing the number of police community support officers in Wales. I was really proud of what Labour did for policing when we were in power. The Tories have destroyed it. Almost 300 fewer police officers. And this is a massive issue in Wrexham. This is a massive issue that we used to have a police officer in every ward in Wrexham. And now we have major antisocial behaviour problems in our town centre, which I was asked about twice by two businesses in the town today because of the Tory cuts to policing, and they are being held to account on this, and we in the Labour Party have committed to restoring neighbourhood policing and to having a fair and decent policing system.
And how are you going to fund that? The question was, do you support devolving policing to Wales? Because people are getting mixed messages from the different manifestos. Where do you stand? People have got a right to know.
We are funding it from inheritance tax that isn't going ahead, which the Tories have proposed, and which we have indicated clearly in our manifesto, in our Welsh Labour
So you
manifesto.
don't support devolving policing, just so I'm clear?
We have made clear that we will support devolution of policing, but not at the present time, because the priority is getting more police officers onto our streets, not to get involved in a constitutional debate which is never raised by individual constituents in the way that real issue of the number of police officers on our streets was with me today when I was in Wrexham town centre. So numbers of policing, that's the important issue, not this tug of war that Plaid Cymru are obsessed with about who makes the decision.
It's about shielding our police force. You support devolving policing to Manchester, but not Wales. That's ridiculous.
Well, Poppins, Carol?
I didn't quite hear the question, Rob, but one of the things that I want to stress here, because I think it's absolutely crucial in terms of moving forward, and I think Ian may have mentioned the PCSOs. I think in terms of community policing, they play an absolutely vital and crucial role which isn't sufficiently recognised. And this is a personal mission of mine which I've already started working on by flagging it up with the Peace and Crime Commissioner. I really feel that within Wrexham and across Wales, we need to secure the funding for PCSOs, because I think in terms of all the issues with regard to being aware of what's going on in local communities, the role that they can play is absolutely vital. And were I to be elected to be Wrexham's next MP, that is an issue which I would like to take forward. I think that they can be given, I would like to see a position where they're given more powers and also their role is made more secure. Because at the moment, we don't know necessarily from year to year to what extent funding will be continued. And I think that their role can be used very differently to protect our communities. We need more police as well. But I think in terms, and the Welsh Liberal Democrats are proposing more money to be spent so that the whole of the police force can be enhanced in terms of numbers. But because of the so many different types of issues that the police across the board now have to confront, I think the time is now to look at the role of PCSOs.
You're seething away there. Do you want to?
No, the counter-terrorism budget has been protected. It will be increased, which is extremely important at the moment. If I can come back on the last question, because I'm not getting an awful lot of time here to come back on anything, would that be all right?
We're on policing, so it'd be good to keep it on top.
Okay, keep it on top. Of course, I want to see more police. Of course, any cuts is devastating to that area. It makes it extremely difficult. That, of course, is something I want to see more of. But as I said, we've seen more counter-terrorism. Well, that money has been protected. There'll be more. Shake your head, it's true. That money is being increased, and that is extremely important at the moment. But we need, I'd love to see more PCSOs and smarter ways of working to keep the police time freed up, so we have more police on the streets exactly where we need them. And I'd like to, obviously work with the Police and Crime Commissioner over these issues as well, because I think it's important about their priorities, about where our police are, as when I've had the meetings in Roseley, the town centre, about policing issues. We can see that the difficulty that if you actually move police into an area, obviously with less police, it's hard, another area misses out. So as a result of the action that I took, that meant that the police, we've had an increased police presence in the town. Obviously, we don't want that the police.
No, we have less police. We have fewer police in the town because the Tories cut the number of officers. That's the truth.
If I could please continue, I said as a direct result of the meetings that we had in Roseley, it's well documented. The police will tell you this. We had an increased police presence in the town centre and in Roseley. And as I was just trying to say, the police would be the first to tell you that that is not sustainable to keep that up, because it means they pull resources from other areas. that is something, of course, I would want to work with the Police and Crime Commissioner and others about the priorities of policing and where they should be, because obviously everything can't be a priority, and that makes things, of course, very difficult. I think you'd agree with what I've just said if now you've heard me finish it.
No, I wouldn't, because there are 300 fewer police because of Conservative and I have to say Liberal Democrat decisions that were made in 2010. So the reality is, when Labour was in power, we had a police officer for every ward in Wrexham. We don't now because of your party. So what you're saying. Okay, you're making a particular point, but it's like saying that I will give you £1 when you've taken £10 away. No. That's the reality. That's the record that this man is standing on, because he's the Conservative.
Your party's cut 20,000 police officers. There's no
He's
getting
sort of
away
determined
from
to argue with me. He doesn't listen to what I'm saying.
No, I'm making the point that the Conservatives have cut policing, and the people of Wrexham
I'll say you've
are
got
angry
three
about
candidates
that.
nodding along. Is that something you do recognise that has been?
That's exactly what I've just said. I said it makes it very difficult. The Labour Party and other parties have opposed every single deficit reducing measure since 2010. We've had to make some very difficult decisions, and with that, as I've said, there are things that I don't like. Austerity is pitched sometimes in meetings like this and hustings meetings like this as some kind of fun choice. It's not a fun choice. To me, that is what you have. That's the card you have to play when there is less money. If I can
it hasn't worked.
All right, let Carrie finish my sentence.
Well, I'm saying austerity isn't necessary, it is a choice, Andrew.
I don't believe that
and
at all.
it's a choice your party have made to target the most vulnerable in our communities, to target the public sector, because the truth is that the Tory party have devastated heavy industry in Wales under Thatcher, and they're determined to come back and finish the job if we let them. And in Plaid Cymru, we're not going to stand for it.
More minds were closed under Labour.
And it hasn't worked. That is the key point, because George Osborne and David Cameron told us in 2010 that the deficit would be gone by 2015. It hasn't worked. It's still there. They're talking about it being in 2022. It will never work because austerity doesn't work. We need investment in infrastructure. We need investment in broadband. We need investment in roads. And that is the way that we will build a more efficient economy, particularly in North Wales, particularly locally. Look at the way that the road to the industrial estate has made the industrial estate more attractive for investment and created more jobs. That's investment, and is the opposite of the failed austerity policy.
The road leads to the prison that you opposed.
On that bombshell, we have gone from policing there to somehow the industrial estate road. We've got reams and reams of questions. I'm very conscious of the time. We've not asked you a direct question, Carol. In terms of this, you've worked locally on drugs and social behaviour issues in the town centre as a councillor. Your party's one of the few that's potentially looking at legalisation on certain drugs. How does that stack up for you?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that we've actually brought the debate to the fore of whether we should, and in my view we should, make a decision about whether we move the whole focus of the debate around drugs away from criminalisation to make it into more of a health issue, and whether or not certain drugs should be legalised. So I'm proud of the fact that my party has brought it forward, controversial though it no doubt is. So that's my stance. I'm very supportive of that policy. But I think we need, I as you said, Rob, I was very closely involved for a long time, 8-9 years, because I got involved very early on the issues concerning what was happening on the streets of Wrexham a long time ago. I was the councillor who called for one of the very first meetings of all the agencies to be brought together. I actually called that meeting, and it's from those early meetings that we've made the improvements and the progress towards trying to deal with the problems. Now, I know that we still have problems that we're still trying to deal with, but I also know that a huge amount of work has gone on to try and address the issues which have been referred to, particularly in one ward and also on the streets of the town. But what I'd like to say also is, in terms of addressing all these issues and addressing the issues caused by drug addiction, but that's not the only addiction that we're dealing with here, is that there are no quick or easy solutions. That in our town, people talk about the town centre and the town centre wards, but each of the individual town centre wards experienced a different type of problem. And they weren't just necessarily, those problems were not solely of people with drug addiction. The visible, vulnerable folk that we were aware of on our streets had huge personal problems that may have stemmed from drug addiction, but they also had problems around homelessness, alcoholic addiction, mental health problems. So in terms of dealing with the issues, there were an awful lot of different types of problems that needed to be dealt with, and a huge number of different agencies, ranging from government in London to Cardiff, to local council, to the Welsh Assembly in Cardiff, to our local council, to charities, to volunteers, all those different groups of people, the health, Betsy Cadwallader, UHB, all had to be brought together in order to work together to really look seriously at how we deal with the problems that have been in the centre of what an awful lot of the publicity, and not always favourable publicity, that Wrexham has received of late. So that was rather a long answer, but in terms of legalising cannabis, I know that maybe it's controversial, but I'm very, very pleased to see it on the agenda.
Unhappy that the voters will put that on their manifesto, Carrie?
Well, we have actually said that we do support legalising cannabis for medicinal use. I'd agree with an awful lot of what Carol has just said. I think the war on drugs has failed. We know that, people in Wrexham know that, we know that when we walk into our town centres, the approach that we're taking at the moment isn't working. I think we've got some very Wrexham specific issues that we need to debate, possibly at a county council level, about where certain services are located. They're all collected around the town centre and the roads of the area, and I think that's contributing to making the issue much more visual. I support the approach that's being taken by our Police and Crime Commissioner, Arvon Jones, which is about, similar to what Carol said, it's about treating this issue as a health issue rather than a crime. And there's an evidence base for doing that. If you look at best practice from around the world, places like Portugal, Switzerland, where they're actually having an impact on this, that's what they're doing. So I think we do have to be open-minded about this, and I think if we're serious about tackling this, the carrying on as normal approach just isn't going to cut it. We're going to have a grown-up debate in Wrexham and in our society more generally about how we really get to grips with tackling that. And if we're going to do it, we've got to look at best practice around the world, and I'm glad to say that we're leading on that.
As I've said publicly, and I've done quite a lot on this issue, legalising drugs isn't something that sits well with me. It's not something that I naturally think, yeah, that's the right solution. But as I've said publicly in the press, when Arvon has said about this and the like, the only way that we can achieve any answers to the solution and to the problems that we've got in Wrexham at the moment is for everybody to be working together. Exactly as Carol has said, responsibility falls across the Member of Parliament, the Assembly Member, the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Police, the Health Board, the Council. And unless we've got an MP that's willing to work with absolutely everybody, including the Council, who are a big player in this, we're not going to make any progress. And that's why, although that doesn't sit well with me, I did say publicly, we should all sit down, we should all get together, listen to Arvon, listen to others, because unless you've got a starting point where we're actually going to hear what they say, we're not going to be able to move forward. So we shouldn't discount anything that's being put forward, whether it's something I agree with or whether it's something I disagree with. We've got to get everybody around the table. Carrie's picked up on a very, very important point from the meetings that I've had in Rosetheigh and the town centre, is the services are split across. And now you ask anybody in Rosetheigh who are dealing with these problems, they will not accept an answer, which is quite true, that they've had their planning, these services are where they are and they can't be moved. But when you're dealing with the effects of that and the impact of these problems, that's very, very difficult for you to accept. And I think we have to find a way with these agencies where we can find some funding, where we can actually look at getting one centre, as we're calling for, getting it all under one roof in a more appropriate location, so we stop this sort of ping-ponging of people across the town and the problems that it causes. But we've got to look at two very, very separate things. And that is that we make sure that the people who need the help get the help, and that we also look at the problems that are caused by some people with addictions and everything else to say that's not acceptable in our town, in our residential areas, and we have to deal with that as well. But it's very separate. We have to look after the people and take care of the problems.
The success of neighbourhood policing and the model that Labour introduced was the integration through the Crime and Disorder Act of policing and local authorities working together. And I am absolutely committed to that. My real concern is that the local authority, with whom I work very closely, for example on the interdiction of broadband into Wrexham, have not worked either with the Assembly member or with me to resolve this issue, and have not fulfilled their role in terms of enforcement of their own police public spaces protection order in the local in the town centre. There does need to be a collegiate approach, a collective approach, and a health-based approach, and that's absolutely right. I think that in a sense legalisation is a bit of a side issue because many of the psychoactive substances were until very recently actually legal, but we're still causing massive problems. So it is a complex issue. It is an issue that does require us to work together. But you know, businesses in the town centre are massively concerned about this. They are really concerned that they are going to go to the wall unless everybody does work together and cooperates with each other to address this.
Yeah, very, very brief. Very, very brief.
Quickly on this, I think it's an interesting point to make in terms of the role of the MP going forward in this debate. And one of the issues is very much at the top end of policy making in terms of the unintended consequences of policy. And one of the issues that I flagged up incessantly on the council was that those who are responsible for the legislation and the policy making, both down in London, so that would be the MP, and indeed in Cardiff, they have to write into policy and strategy, because it actually isn't there, what happens to our communities, to people who haven't got addiction problems, the sorts of things we all know about from the issues that were flagged up very frequently of late in Rose Theme. Policy statements have got to include the fact that everybody, every single member of the community, has to take responsibility for the unintended consequences of policy making. And I think that that is a message that whoever is fortunate enough to be elected the town's next MP must take on board, that we need more of an awareness of the adverse effects on our residential communities of some of the consequences of policy and strategy around not just drug addiction but all addiction problems.
So, as the MP, if I am elected, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I will work with the council, I will work with everybody on this, because we can't have a situation where the council are constantly being attacked day in, day out in the press over these issues. It's not going to get us anywhere. As I've said from the beginning, we have to get all these heads around the table, everybody singing from the same hymn sheet. The police will be the first to tell you we can't arrest our way out of this problem. So the PSPO has to also, it's not the silver bullet, but it has to be given the chance to catch up, because legal highs have completely changed the whole face of the drug scene in Wrexham, completely changed it. And everybody sort of has to catch up to that point, you know, to address this, what is quite a relatively new problem with spice and Mamba and everything else.
PSPO has helped.
Yes, it has helped.
It's not an immediate solution.
No,
and
absolutely
it's not
not.
The only solution.
And that's why we can't attack the council over and over again, as we see.
It has improved the situation, and I agree with you about not constantly knocking the council, because some of the steps that have been taken recently have helped.
Carrie, be very quick.
I'm just saying that the biggest thing that we can do, and that Wrexham's MP can do, is to campaign to change UK drugs policy if we're serious about tackling it. I'd be prepared to go there and do that. I don't know what Andrew's prepared to do, what he's
I'll look at
prepared
anything,
to
as
do.
I've said.
But what we're doing now is not working. We can all see that. Everybody in Wrexham can see that. We need a different approach.
But the main problem in Wrexham is spice, and the legislation introduced recently is not working and needs to be changed. But we do need a collective approach. But I have tried to work with this council. This council have refused to work with me and with the Assembly member, and that is the truth. They've been much more interested in pursuing their own political agenda than working collectively to deal with this really serious problem that constituents raise with me all the time.
We'll have to draw a line there. We're massively over time, and my wrist is buzzing away telling me that we need to wrap it up. Thank you all for taking part this evening. We'll quickly go along the panel to have a very, very brief message of why you think people should vote for you next week now, essentially. Carol, would you like to kick off?
you want to live in Wrexham, in a town that is vibrant and thriving, in which all residents and people who work in the town have the chance to thrive and to prosper, vote for Carol O'Toole. If you want a different approach to Brexit, if you want to have a voice in the deal, vote for Carol O'Toole. If you want to fight, if you want to be given the position, given the chance to vote for someone who will fight against a hard Brexit, vote for Carol O'Toole. If you want to live in a society that's united and tolerant and open, vote for Carol O'Toole.
Well, we're asking people to think about Wales in this election, to think about who is going to defend our communities from what will likely be a Tory government across the border, about who is going to put forward the best post-Brexit plan to protect the Welsh economy, to defend our communities here. It's clear that Labour is too weak and divided to defend our communities from the Tories. They're too weak and divided to defend Wrexham and to defend Wales. So if you want Wales to have a voice, then you need to vote for a Plaid Cymru MP who will go down to Westminster and fight our corner with every bit of energy they've got. If that's what you want, vote for me.
All I would ask is that people would please consider giving me a chance so that I can get stuck into the plans that I've got to improve our town centre, to make it a fun, vibrant, exciting place to visit, to live and to work as well, to tackle the drugs problems, to work collaboratively with everybody, not attacking everybody, but to work with everybody in true partnership to get these things done. To give me a chance to improve our infrastructure, our road, our rail, our bus network, our broadband, our mobile phone signal, to attract more businesses, more high-paying jobs to our area, so that, and then to complete that package so that when people are looking for somewhere to invest, where to base their business, that they want to come and live in Wrexham, that it's a great town, it's a great place where you've got great services and everything on your doorstep. So if you consider giving me a chance on those grounds, and someone who's going to fight for the best Brexit deal for our area alongside Theresa May, please give me a chance and vote Andrew Atkinson. Thank you.
The Tories have had a chance. I am a strong voice for investment in Wrexham, to the transport in Wrexham, for jobs in Wrexham. I'm a strong voice for more policing in Wrexham, to working together with the community to address the real difficulties that have been caused by Tory austerity policies and Tory cuts to our town. A Tory representative for this town will not bring the investment. They've been in government for 7 years, it hasn't come. It's necessary to vote Labour and vote for me for a strong voice for Wrexham.
Thanks very much. And thank you everybody who's watching. We'll take a short break around about 10 minutes now. For those watching Wrexham.com, if you hit refresh, the Fluid South debate video will pop up. Likewise on Facebook, if you hit refresh, the debate feed will pop up on your screen as well. But thanks very much for everybody on the panel, and thanks to Fat Ball for cocktails. I hope we'll be enjoying that. Hope you enjoy the refresher bar in there as well. So